Hello everyone, it is time for another reaction type video. Now, I will be frank, I just had my lunch, so I'll do my best to not burp directly into the mic. I'll be sure to edit and mute as needed. But in terms of this video, I wanted to take a look at this because it's addressing more Bungie drama, but specifically more of the Bungie CEO drama. There was already one already. Now, now I wanted to look at this because flashback to when Pete Parsons was initially announcing his retirement or exit from Bungie. I had the theory, of course, that the usual theory that people thought of: either he smelled the roses and it was time to leave because there wasn't much else he could get out of the company, or it was a Sony pushing him out the door so that basically that either Sony says we replace you or you can replace with somebody internally. Whatever the reasons, either it was Parsons leaving of his own accord or him being suggested to leave. So on that note, I saw this video, watched 30 seconds in it just to make sure the topic was, of course, worth discussing. But it is basically talking about the CEO and how possibly he was forced to exit as opposed to exiting on his own. Now let's go full screen, rewind to start, and let's listen along with, of course, some commentary.
Look, there's every chance you've missed this news, but basically it has been a long few months over at Bungie.
Understatement.
I mean, just think about it. We've seen the marathon delay, the plagiarism allegations, and now
that wasn't allegations, it was confirmed.
Concurrent peaks for a Destiny expansion ever, and sadly for them, the mood is not improving whatsoever. Look at the subreddit, and you will find a community that's all but given up. The reason why?
Accurate.
Well, because they feel like the devs have given up too. But it might not be the resignation of developers. It might not be the community giving up. No, I think the most telling thing about Bungie's state is that the CEO resigned. Let's begin by looking at some numbers, and I know Steam player counts aren't everything, but they are something, and they don't look good for Edge of Fate.
It's a good portion.
Which is the latest Destiny expansion. Now, part of that was the final shape giving people an off-ramp, right? The final shape is basically the big culmination of a plotline, so if you're gonna duck out of the game, well, after that, really...
I will say, I kind of wish I did bow out of Destiny. As much as I was very hopeful at the time, I was also hopeful to the point that I was like, all right, this long storyline is over, but there's still plenty of places we can go. And so I was excited for where we could go. But sadly, looking back, hindsight, I kind of wish I did kind of put a pause on Destiny at that point, maybe branched out from there. But, hindsight always.
Is the best time. I mean, player sentiment was already low, and the state of Bungie, and of course the marathon debacles, did not help. But here's another problem. Only 22% of critics recommend the new expansion, which is absolutely brutal. And when it did release, well, players found that the new portal system completely reworked the game. And let's just say it was controversial.
So to start the controversial bits of the portal, for those that don't know or have been out of the loop, essentially they put a big marker, or let's just say a pause, a divider, and pretty much said everything from here on is going to be a part of this new system, but everything backwards is not. So if you wish to progress in this new system, guess what? Everything that was here is practically useless for the long run. However, at the same time, all of this content, we took basically half of the game and we put that in the portal, but the other half of the game, the crucial half, we're gonna let it sit for a little bit and add it later. So at the start, the portal was very much half of, or little of what we already owned being used in new content, and there barely actually being any new content. Like in total, Edge of Fate was like the portal and extra activity, a raid, and that was it. I made a video discussing about how Rise of Iron was supposed to be a comparable expansion, but Rise of Iron was packed full, while Edge of Fate was like it's there. Moving on.
So Bungie basically added a parallel power system, and as Paul Tassi frames it, this effectively sunsets 80% of the game. It's
a very good way to put it.
In engaging with anything outside of that system now. And that's because bonuses stack in a way that makes everything else almost irrelevant. Seeing the feedback, Bungie tried to fix complaints, but the fixes would have slowed progression even more, so they had to walk those back. And then, well, they had to come up with something else entirely. And all of this got worse, of course, after the QA layoffs of this summer. So the stuff in-game's been going bad, but I'd say, given the QA layoffs, it's hardly a surprise that in addition to all of that, there is a never-ending tide of bugs, errors, exploits, all that stuff. And for a peek at what's happening, well, look at this. Raid leaderboards that are full of cheaters.
Yep, that didn't
There's
help at
paid
all.
armor that turns players invisible. There's rewards not
I didn't
being
even know about
granted,
that. What the
soft
hell?
blocks in multiple places in the game, and people losing access to paid content and stores, and the list of things goes on. And then came even more frustration because Bungie.
Oh, actually,
also
hang on.
seemed-
On that note of losing paid content in stores, let me actually take you to something else that I saw just a second ago. This right here looks a bit of another Sony smoking gun. As we all know, Helldivers some time ago, they ran into that great controversy where you required a PSN attachment to Helldivers 2 to play on PC, and when you didn't, or how would I say it? When we revolted, essentially, and said we don't want that, they pretty much looked elsewhere and said, hey, if your country doesn't have access to PSN, you can't even play Helldivers, period. It was revoked down the line, eventually, but this new title, Steam is issuing full refunds for Destiny 2 Edge of Fate and Year of Prophecy Ultimate Edition after Bungie blocked game access in multiple countries with no prior warning. I hate to say it, I'm not looking at the article just yet. I'll just leave that for maybe a separate video, a separate topic. This sounds like a Sony thing. This doesn't sound like a Bungie thing, as clearly, Bungie has done it in the past. However, if it does turn out to be Bungie at the source, that is not a good look for them at all. Let's get back into it.
To remove aspirational loot from the reward pool. They seemingly made it paid instead. So that was a shit show. Of course, it's one they had to fix as well after a bunch of backlash. And, I mean, we haven't even talked about the Star Wars-themed expansion controversy in this video. So in short, right?
Air quotes inspired by.
And the man in charge during the development of all of this just quit. But it's more than just that he quit. It's some of the context and also some of the incentives. Bungie CEO is gone. Pete Parsons gets to walk away from all of this chaos. Someone else can deal with the consequences of the company's actions during his tenure. In a blog post at the end of August, Parsons announced this departure. He had 20 years at Bungie, and he said that he decided to pass the torch. But the timing is kind of interesting. You see, he's leaving 3 years and 1 month after Bungie's acquisition by PlayStation, and that may just align with stock options maturing from that sale. And that's something clearly in the minds of the staff whom he fired. They reacted with barely disguised venom on social media. Say ex-social media manager Griffin Bennett had a particularly sharp response. He just said, vested stock cleared, damage done, but hey, we're all a family, right, Pete? You see, back in December 2023...
That's a bit of a smoking gun.
...worrying about something, they essentially thought the leadership at Bungie were preparing to cut and run after the launch of Marathon. Obviously, the launch of Marathon did not happen when anyone thought it would.
Not at all.
Those leaks. And what it looks like is that even if that was the plan, while Marathon may have been delayed, Parsons' exit was certainly not delayed in line with the game. So to understand this, let's go back to 2021. Staff framed Parsons as slow to act on toxic work culture allegations. They sent direct letters to him, and his intentions were supposedly good, better than some others of Bungie leadership, but ultimately, he didn't really react fast enough. But this was just the start. What followed next? Well, the multi-project incubation period that sapped resources, the sale to PlayStation, disastrous monetization demands being placed on the Destiny team. All of this stuff harmed developer and player sentiment, and I think most dangerously, it put players and developers against each other.
I think at this point, especially what he said, putting it into like microtransaction development, legitimately, I could deal with the destruction of Eververse. Yes, I would be sad that we didn't get so many cool looking designs, but at this point, fashion is fashion. You've probably already made the best armor set you've ever done. You don't need to continue to buy every single armor set that comes through just because of the what if. The what if of making designs in terms of Destiny fashion and cosmetics is unfortunately the things that keep people going back to the Silver Store. So at this point, they could quarter, they could do any sort of reduction, they could eliminate it completely, and I feel like people wouldn't be the worst off because of it.
And when that sort of thing starts to happen, game communities can just enter a death spiral. But then came the endless stream of layoffs both before and following the final shape. Because hey, congratulations, you did the final shape, people seem to have loved it, and your reward is already planned layoffs. Epic. Now add to this the woes of this summer, and just before that, the entire Marathon saga that played out. It's a lot. Now, look, to be clear, Parsons isn't directly responsible for everything that went bad. He's
Oh, no.
not the guy individually, unilaterally making choices about systems.
But he is the man on top.
Implementation, right? Maybe he'll be a tiebreaker between some of his leads, something like that. But he exemplified the company culture. His decisions led to layoffs. Those layoffs left teams struggling. We know, as an example, struggling to run QA. So if you're a player finding...
I'm not even sure there is a QA department anymore.
What's going on here? Maybe that would have something to do with it. And with all that bad news, it's no wonder that Bungie couldn't retain experience. So, at worst, he is indirectly responsible for the company's state, but obviously, as CEO, yeah, he was responsible. But here's...
Yeah, about that. As much as in the modern day, the CEO and the chairman, and of course, the CEO isn't lone power, because that leads to a king on top that can't be challenged by anyone. Excuse me. The idea that Pete Parsons didn't or was not responsible for any of the wrongdoings is kind of a naive idea, because the man was CEO. If he looked at something and thought this was a bad idea, he could put a stop to it, or at least do something to change it that wouldn't be vetoed. Like, it's like checks and balances. If, let's just say, HR wasn't doing their job, guess what? The CEO could fire and restructure HR. Boom. Ta-da. It's lots of cases like that. As much as he may not have been directly responsible, he could have fixed it. And, you know, he's a CEO. The man should have updates of everything that's happening at this company. There's no way that he didn't see stuff and just let them happen because he thought they were fine.
Something. If Parsons is indirectly responsible for the company's state, what's curious is that his successor will not have the same role.
Mr. Eggman
is a man called Justin Truman, and you might remember him from some of our previous coverage. We talked about his infamous GDC presentation on sustainable live service development. You might remember a quote, which is,
"No overproduction."
Obviously, Destiny players felt that they had been under-delivered to for quite a while, so it obviously fired away as a meme. It became kind of typical, an example of everything that people thought was wrong and going bad with Bungie. In reality, what he said in the talk was far more nuanced, and I guess the easiest way, albeit crude, is to just say he was basically saying, don't blow your load. That's kind of it. Now, he actually engaged with the criticism of that meme when it came to accepting his new role, and what's interesting is that ex-staff weren't actively hostile to his appointment, which I think does suggest it could be a step up at least. But here's the thing, he is replacing Pete Parsons, but his new role is not that of Chief Executive Officer. He instead will be Bungie's studio head. Now, this may seem like some semantics, but I think it represents the most fundamental shift at Bungie in years. The reason why is simple. It suggests that Bungie's independence is ending under PlayStation. That's a threat that's loomed over them for a long-ass time. It's obvious that now it's coming true. And even before Parsons announced his departure, PlayStation were closing in, and they weren't doing it sneakily. The Sony CFO, Lin Tao, explained this to investors in early August, where
their
he said,
independence
quote,
is shrinking.
Structural reform, as we announced last year. And then he added the crucial bit of information, quote, this independence is getting lighter.
Getting lighter, that's the word.
Into a role which is becoming more part of PlayStation Studios. Yeah, so integration is proceeding. The independence of Bungie is going away. And obviously, this followed the 2024 restructuring, where PlayStation moved 12% of Bungie, which is 155 roles, directly into SIE, which is Sony Interactive Entertainment. Those people then formed Team LFG, and they're currently working on a live service MOBA, which is one of the things that came out of Bungie's incubation period. Anyway, they also formed the Creative Studios
not
team,
feeling hot about that.
Live service development, which obviously makes a lot of sense when you know that PlayStation really wanted those live services. Now, before that, well, Sony's incoming CEO visited Bungie, and when he did, he praised the staff, but he said there was, quote, room for improvement. Not necessarily on the staff. No, his room for improvement was specifically regarding business expenses and accountability for development timelines.
That could be a very good thing, because it's kind of what I pointed out. I have a video that's going to be coming, but a topic that was discussed was essentially how shortcuts are happening abundance with Ash and Iron. It's a free update, returning lazy narrative writing with timeline jumps, red faction, lazy kind of character copy paste and everything. And I generally push the question of the time and money that was saved by just saying shortcut alternate timelines and shortcut Red Legion. Oh, excuse me. Basically, how much money was saved by using the shortcut options in terms of narrative and season design that then went into the Eververse to push even more armor sets, even more cosmetics. And if this is what I actually think it is, and Sony, or at least whoever this is speaking from Sony, is trying to push more, or how should I say this, better content as opposed to more money profiting stuff. I'm not sure exactly how to say it, but if this means more content versus more cosmetics, I would be super happy to hear that.
Certainly sounds like a bit of a threat. And those are the types of failures that staff are not responsible for. They're the sorts of things management is responsible for. And now, Bungie has no CEO. The leadership will report directly to PlayStation. And it's a PlayStation that's different, one that is shifted towards cheaper, faster game development with more central oversight, because they essentially realized, oh dear, we put a lot of chips into Concord, and we really didn't monitor the quality of that, did we? So you might be wondering, is this better for Bungie? It's weird, right? Because we don't know, you don't know, none of us know, because, the future hasn't happened yet. And also, game development has a lot of lag time. Parsons left at the end of August, but we're still going to feel the impact of his leadership, I suppose his and his team's plans, for a long time. Now, if we're to assume that Truman has the best of intentions, which I am happy to do, well, it's also the case that he's likely under a hell of a lot of pressure, because he now needs to deliver change for both Destiny and Marathon.
Honestly, I kind of how to articulate, rework, here we go. I was still under the opinion that Marathon should have probably been scrapped, because unfortunately I did look at it and across the timeline. I did notice a decline in Bungie's productions with Destiny, not long before, as well as during the time they said Marathon was being worked on. I know they originally said that mostly Crucible staff were taken from the Destiny team and put onto Marathon, hence why Crucible was practically left for dead in terms of development. But at the same time, I feel like Marathon should have just been scrapped, because so many times has it shown since they started developing Marathon that Bungie juggling two major IPs and then trying to keep them at the same kind of caliber is definitely showing the stress tests in terms of Bungie staff, Bungie leadership, production. Ever since the start, they've always worked with once they got big after Halo, they only worked on one franchise at a time. First it was Halo, then Halo Reach happened, they ended. They were working on Destiny in the background, and then Destiny came out. They were working on that full time. Then Destiny continues for a long while. Destiny 2 is a thing, and that's the same franchise skipping forward. And now with Destiny 2, 8 years later, now suddenly instead of going to Destiny 3 or a new franchise as the staple of Bungie, Bungie is trying to keep Destiny and Marathon. And of course, it's the first time in the modern day with the live service major IPs that they have tried to balance having two at once and working on both. So one is definitely suffering from the other, and the other isn't exactly developing well. So maybe just scrap it. That's still kind of my opinion of Marathon. As much as it would be, of course, a bunch of wasted time, a bunch of wasted money, it would be easier to just get the tax write-off, scrap it, and then throw all of that tax write-off back into Destiny.
Both of which are extremely embattled. And he's working with a studio that is now bled of its senior talent via multiple rounds of layoffs, and also dealing with fans that are rightly not happy and rightly not trusting. Meanwhile, production patterns and product offerings keep on changing. Look at the different iterations of seasonal yearly content that Destiny has had. Look at how Marathon is being forced to change by a market that, is, I think, quite literally demanding change of it. Though, of course, none of this will be news to Truman, because he's been the Chief Development Officer since 2022. Before that, he was Destiny's General Manager, and he switched roles right as the chaos began with the Lightfall expansion. He's been part of the decision.
I didn't know that,
since then,
but that would make sense.
Now. So the question is simple. Do he and PlayStation actually have a plan? At the very least, PlayStation can be pleased about something, and that's licensed revenue from Destiny Rising.
Yeah, that's
Destiny
probably
Rising?
sustaining Destiny right now.
Game with gacha elements, so yeah, it's bringing in the money. And as we've covered, that's where a lot of the industry's money comes from now. And by most accounts, NetEase used their blank slate with making this Destiny spin-off
Jermaine!
game actually quite well. They supposedly made a passable Destiny campaign. Players were satisfied enough until, of course, they hit the end game and the gacha and power and all of that began to rear its head. But still, it brought in some happy numbers. PlayStation will like that. And PlayStation now treats Marathon as their investor marketing centerpiece. We see that from recent accounts of them saying that things have improved with the game.
You know, I just gotta comment on that little bit right there. That little bit of shown gameplay. Hang on with Marathon. I'll mute the audio just so it's not annoying. The fact that this is a battle royale or an extraction shooter, you are always aware of people. The idea that your friend here just got murked, and then you got this guy that's just unapologetically not paying attention at all. You would have definitely had a friend that said, oh crap, I just got, I'm dead, I'm down. And you would have turned around and see what that problem is, considering one guy is on the floor, the other guy is on the roof with you. One is definitely a bigger problem. I just hate when freaking gameplay trailers and stuff like that show completely unrealistic modern occurrences. I get you're trying to show off animations and such things like that, but that is just some straight up bullshit.
Game, talking about features added like proximity chat, that the mission system rewards players better, that the UI and UX has got significant improvements, that they've, of course, removed the plagiarized art. All of those things to rehab its image and, again, tell the investor story that they need to tell. But there is a simple enough fact. Marathon will arrive late to the extraction shooter party. You see, both Escape from Tarkov and Arc Raiders will hit their own version 1.0s first.
You know, I was talking about that ages ago when I forget if it was initial feedback or just talking about how much it drew from Destiny's development. But I mentioned that that Marathon hit the extraction shooter market late, and that was before its delay. Like, you had Tarkov, you had well, I don't know if Hunt Showdown counts as more Battle Royale, but you had Tarkov, Hunt Showdown, Delta Force has its own thing, Arc Raiders is going to be coming. And then on top of that, as much as extraction shooter and battle royales are different genres, they bleed together very well. So then on top of all the other extraction shooters, you also had battle royales on the market that you're competing with. And of course, you're dealing with Warzone, Fortnite, and all of the big ones. So in reality, Marathon was hitting the extraction / battle royale market extremely late, and it had such a rock start, or off start, I should say. No, excuse me.
It may have a shot of success. Bungie can still deliver cool things from time to time, undoubtedly. But the problem, Bungie will deliver Marathon under, to be charitable, let's just call them unenviable conditions, just like they have with Destiny. And when you look at Destiny right now, you do see that it ain't working. The future
it's not.
Bungie,
it's
then,
really
well,
not.
In theory, more PlayStation engagement means more oversight. So if you miss your development targets, yeah, you're not reporting to Pete Parsons who can spin it to Sony. No, you're going to be answering to PlayStation directly. The same goes for missed revenue targets. And if that leads to more layoffs with the same delivery expectations, then Bungie will just have to face the worst of all worlds. One where they can only be punished, where the fruits of their labor will be privatized and, you know, they'll get laid off if something doesn't go well. The sorts of mercenary decision-making we've seen from a lot of these companies. But if we're trying to stay grounded and stay with the perspective that most people are the hero of their own story, that are, at least through their own narrative, actually trying, well, we can think about a statement from Totoki to investors. The one basically of Bungie devs always having had talent and always wanting to deliver for players.
That is something that I do wonder on the regular, is how often were, how should I say this, talented or otherwise skilled individual or people that are genuinely determined to make Destiny good, to keep it as the game to play, how many of those developers that genuinely wanted Destiny to succeed and not just are looking to either sustain their job or sustain their income, how many of those developers that genuinely wanted to make Destiny succeed were cut off by the upper management, were either laid off straight up or were trying to work on something and told, no, we don't want you working on that, we'd rather you do this. And let's just say they took 20% of the people that would have made the next raid and they put them into a team of making new armor sets. And 20% of the people that were used to making good raids no longer are making raids and are now making armor sets. And that's really not what they're good at. And sure, they might succeed, but it's not what they should be doing, if that makes sense.
You know, he could see that. And a lot of the sort of veiled or not so veiled threats from PlayStation, they were always about management. And when you look at some of the other big games, yeah, Sony does seem to have a better handle on what a quality video game is, you know, for all their faults, than, say, Microsoft does. It seems the failure of Concord truly shocked PlayStation into waking up, honestly, and that seems to be what has made them completely okay with delaying Marathon, which I'm sure the older PlayStation wouldn't have wanted to do.
Probably
Certainly
not.
PlayStation that looked at Concord and thought, absolutely, well, yeet that one out. I'm sure it'll go well. We're PlayStation. Look how photoreal these characters are. The gamers and the people will love it. So in the good timeline, we get a PlayStation that holds leadership accountable, that stops Bungie leadership hiding behind their company's somewhat greater than average independence within the PlayStation roster of studios. If that accountability is there and the incentives are aligned, then maybe there is hope. Maybe Bungie can catch their breath. Maybe even they can take the time to rebuild. Doing that will be hard, and the likes of Destiny is a live game with a profoundly disappointed player base, one whose cynicism does feel rational and does not feel jaded, because they've genuinely had a very goddamn bizarre time.
On that point, several times, as I noted not only in my own comments, people discussing the same story, people like me who have been with the franchise for 11 years at this point. Like, just in perspective, I was still hopeful and vying for things during Revenant, after Final Shape in the second expansion. But that's kind of when everyone else left the boat, everyone else stopped playing, then I realized I was playing myself, I was playing Revenant by myself, I wasn't exactly raiding, like I did Salvation's Edge maybe 3 times, or however many times killing the boss to get the Linear Fusion exotic. Regardless, Revenant was probably the time that I dropped off and officially stopped being the hopeful fanatic that I kind of was when it came to Destiny and Bungie, being excited for everything they did, and then started looking at things more critically and realizing, man, this really ain't it. Because, of course, Heresy, as much as Heresy might have been a success, the story was better, the return of Oryx was actually not so ham-fisted as somehow Palpatine returned in the end, kind of. At the same time, I looked at it, I'm a Destiny 1 veteran, I loved going aboard the Dreadnought. The Taken King was fantastic memories of Destiny and Bungie, but guess what? The Dreadnought, because it's, air quotes, seasonal content and only available through the Nether, it's not a patrol zone, guess what? The Dreadnought was only around for 3 or 4 months, and it's, again, reduced to oblivion. You can go back in the Sunless Cell Strike if that's still a thing, but in the end, still not there. It's just gone. And the same thing is likely to happen with Plague Lands. Beloved Destiny 1 location, even if it was half-assed restoration, it's only around for so long until the next season comes in and, you know, removes its section from the frickin' portal or whatever. But, you know, let's finish up the video.
This story's basically been game development where...
Or actually, I just realized I didn't even hit my point. 11-year or long-term veterans have genuine constructive feedback. That isn't just, this game sucks and I hate it, while not offering genuine feedback and criticisms or otherwise constructive solutions, at least from the naive developer fragments that I can provide. But at the same point, we have genuine constructive feedback. More than just saying game bad. But the people that are like just straight up fanatics about Destiny, that are the types that literally they look at it and say, yeah, this game is shit, but I've been here so long, I'm still going to finish it. And then they ostracize people for having constructive feedback and just saying, this really isn't it. When the community itself ostracizes those for speaking their opinions, I mean, I hate to put it and make this political, but it's like Charlie Kirk. It's like that thing right now. One half of the Destiny community is fanatics that hate every sort of criticism that is any way negative. But then the people who have negative thoughts, guess what? They leave the community. They leave, they go play something else, and then they realize Destiny was shit all along. So it's kind of that weird odd state where people with genuine feedback are being silenced and suppressed and being kicked out of the community in weird ways, to the point where they just leave and they don't come back. And then sure enough, that statement where people are rightfully envied, or I don't know, I forget the words he used, but people are rightly jaded at Destiny for multiple reasons. And I feel like people should actually just understand, if somebody has feedback, it's to be listened to, not suppressed and silenced.
So much of everything goes wrong. But if you want to see the literal opposite of that, a game free from so many of the things that just, be it indie, AA, or AAA, just kill projects. Watch this video next. It's about Team Cherry, and I think you'll really like it.
Well, I would go into that, but that is essentially the end of that. And, that's kind of just looking at it. Man, it is looking not so great for Destiny and Bungie, because if that bit he discussed was true about the fact that Pete Parsons just abandoned ship the moment his stock options matured and were the best they could be, man, that's really not looking great for Bungie in total. Either way, that's kind of what I wanted to read up on, and just because, like I mentioned, my theories were either he left because he just thought there was no more good he could do, and it's time for new management, or Sony pressured him out. But in terms of that, it seems to be neither of those. Is that he held out as long as he could until the getaway bag was ready, and the getaway bag was as full as it could be, so he got out and took as much money with him as he could. So, it's Parsons' opinion of Parsons is already in the dirt, but now it's in the bedrock. It's low. It's in the abyss, as I like to say. But with that, that is all I want to discuss with this video. Another little reaction content video. I do have another one going up because, like I mentioned, it's addressing Bungie and taking shortcuts in terms of development in various places, and I would hope that you keep an eye out for that one, because it's kind of my own critical thoughts of Ashen Iron more than just wow, this sucks. It's more critical than that. It's saying, yeah, this sucks, but it's actually explaining why. But on that note, my name is Mad Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.